Jake Morrison stepped off the transport ship and looked up at the massive towers of the Galactic Military Academy. The buildings stretched so high into the sky that their tops disappeared into the clouds of Centauri Prime. He had never seen anything so big in his life. Even the largest cities on Earth looked like toys compared to this place. The air smelled different here. It was clean and had a slight metallic taste that reminded him of the recycled air on space stations. Jake adjusted the strap of his rifle case and walked toward the main entrance with the other new cadets. Most of the aliens around him were much taller than any human. The Zephyrians had blue skin that seemed to glow in the sunlight, and their eyes were twice the size of human eyes. The Corvan soldiers looked like giant insects covered in armor that grew from their own bodies. Their clicking sounds when they talked made Jake's skin crawl. Katie Wells caught up to him as they walked through the entrance hall. She was carrying 3 bags full of engineering equipment and looked excited about everything she saw. "Can you believe this place, Jake? The technology here is thousands of years ahead of anything we have on Earth." Jake nodded but kept his eyes moving around the room. Old habits from his Marine days made him always check for exits and possible threats. "It's impressive," he said, "but I hope they don't expect us to forget everything we learned back home." They followed signs to the weapons demonstration hall. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high that Jake could barely see it. Hundreds of cadets from different alien species filled the space, all carrying weapons that looked like they belonged in science fiction movies. A Zephyrian cadet near them was holding what looked like a glowing blue sword. When he pressed a button, energy crackled along its edge and the air around it shimmered with heat. Another alien had a weapon that looked like a small cannon, with tubes and wires covering every surface. Jake looked down at his own rifle case and felt a bit embarrassed. His weapon was just a standard kinetic rifle that fired metal bullets using gunpowder. It was the same basic design that humans had been using for hundreds of years, just with better materials and more precise manufacturing. "Attention, all cadets," a voice boomed through the hall. The speaker was a Corvan officer with scars across his armored face. His name tag read Commander Zalneth. "Today you will demonstrate your species' combat capabilities. Each cadet will show their weapon to the class and explain its advantages." The demonstrations began with the alien cadets. A tall Zephyrian named Vexathera went first. She held up her plasma rifle and activated it. The weapon hummed with power and glowed so brightly that Jake had to squint. "This is a Mark 7 plasma rifle," she said proudly. "It can fire energy bolts hot enough to melt through starship armor. The targeting computer can lock onto enemies from 3 kilometers away." The other cadets made impressed sounds. The weapon looked deadly and advanced. Jake had to admit it was much more impressive than his simple rifle. Next came a massive Corvan cadet named Theclon. His weapon looked like a hammer, but when he activated it, the air around it began to bend and twist. "Gravity hammer," he said in a voice like grinding rocks. "It controls gravitational fields to crush enemies or tear apart their equipment. Very effective against all known armor types." More alien cadets showed their weapons. Each one seemed more advanced and powerful than the last. There were guns that fired living ammunition, weapons that could phase through solid matter, and devices that could disrupt an enemy's nervous system from a distance. Finally, Commander Zalneth called Jake's name. "Cadet Morrison, please show us your weapon." Jake walked to the front of the room and opened his case. He pulled out his rifle and held it up. Immediately, several alien cadets began to laugh. The weapon looked plain and simple compared to everything else they had seen. Vexathera pointed at Jake's rifle and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that some kind of training weapon? It looks like something from a museum." More laughter filled the room. Jake felt his face get hot with embarrassment, but he kept his expression calm. He had learned in the Marines never to show weakness in front of people who wanted to see him fail. "This is a standard human kinetic rifle," he said clearly. "It fires metal projectiles using chemical propulsion." A young Zephyrian female named Sithara giggled. "Chemical propulsion? That's so primitive. How do you even aim it without a targeting computer?" Commander Zalneth examined Jake's rifle with barely hidden amusement. He turned it over in his hands, looking for power switches or energy cells. When he found none, he seemed confused. "Where is the power source, Cadet Morrison?" "It doesn't need one, sir," Jake replied. "The ammunition contains its own propellant." This caused even more laughter from the alien cadets. Theclon made a grinding sound that Jake realized was Corvan laughter. "Your species still uses chemical explosions to fire projectiles. How inefficient." Commander Zalneth handed the rifle back to Jake with a look that suggested he felt sorry for him. Cadet Morrison, perhaps you would prefer to observe today's practical exercises, rather than participate. We wouldn't want you to be embarrassed by the performance gap. Katie stepped forward from the crowd of watching cadets. Her face was red with anger at how the aliens were treating her friend. Cadet Morrison has combat experience on 3 different worlds, she said loudly. His weapon may look simple, but he knows how to use it. Vexithara laughed again. Experience with primitive weapons doesn't mean much against modern military technology. Jake felt anger building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. He had been in worse situations than this during his time in the Marines. At least nobody here was actually shooting at him. Commander, Jake said respectfully, I would like to participate in the standard qualification course, if that's allowed. The alien cadets exchanged looks that said they thought Jake was making a big mistake. Commander Zalneth seemed surprised by the request, but he nodded slowly. Very well, Cadet Morrison, but don't expect any special treatment because of your equipment limitations. As Jake walked back to join the other cadets, he heard whispered conversations in alien languages. He didn't need to understand the words to know they were talking about him. The way they looked at his rifle made it clear they thought he was going to fail badly. Katie moved closer to him and whispered, Are you sure about this, Jake? These weapons are way more advanced than anything we trained against. Jake checked his rifle and made sure it was ready for whatever test they would face. Maybe they are, he said quietly. But a weapon is only as good as the person using it, and I've been using this type of rifle for a long time. The first test was about to begin, and Jake knew that everyone expected him to embarrass himself and all humans, but he also knew something the aliens didn't. Sometimes the simplest solution was the best one, especially when lives were on the line. Commander Zalneth led the cadets to a huge training room that could change its appearance using holographic technology. The walls, floor, and ceiling could become any environment the instructors wanted. Jake had heard about this kind of training facility, but seeing it in person was amazing. Today's qualification course will test your accuracy, speed, and tactical thinking, Commander Zalneth announced. The scenarios will become more difficult as you progress. Only cadets who score above 80% will pass. Theklan slammed his gravity hammer on the floor, making a loud metallic sound. This should be easy for those of us with proper weapons. Some cadets might find it more challenging. He looked directly at Jake when he said this. Jake ignored the comment and checked his rifle one more time. He had loaded it with standard ammunition, simple metal bullets that used chemical propellant to achieve high velocity. Nothing fancy, but he knew from experience that they got the job done. The other human cadets gathered around Jake. Besides Katie, there were 2 more humans in their group. Ryan Porter was a pilot from Mars Colony who specialized in close combat. Lisa Hayes was a communications expert from the lunar bases who had trained with security forces. Jake, you don't have to prove anything to these aliens, Ryan whispered. We all know you're a good soldier. This isn't about proving anything, Jake replied quietly. This is about showing them that human technology works just as well as theirs, even if it looks different. Lisa looked worried. But their weapons are so much more powerful. That plasma rifle could probably destroy a small building. Katie was studying her tablet computer, running calculations on the alien weapons they had seen. Power isn't everything, she said thoughtfully. I've been analyzing the energy signatures of their weapons. They're impressive, but they also have some interesting limitations. Before Jake could ask what she meant, Commander Zalneth called for attention. The first scenario will simulate the defense of a space station against enemy boarders. Targets will appear in various locations and you must eliminate them while avoiding civilian areas. The room around them changed instantly. They were now standing in the corridor of a space station, with metal walls and doors leading to different sections. Emergency lights flashed red, and computer voices warned about the enemy attack in several alien languages. Vexithara stepped forward confidently. I'll go first and show everyone how this should be done. She raised her plasma rifle and activated its targeting system. A small holographic display appeared near her eye, showing information about distances and angles. The first target appeared, a holographic enemy soldier hiding behind a corner 50 meters away. Vexithara fired immediately. The plasma bolt screamed through the air and hit the target perfectly, but it also melted a large hole in the wall behind it and destroyed several pieces of station equipment. Direct hit, she announced proudly. Target eliminated in 1.2 seconds. More targets appeared and Vexthara continued firing. Each shot destroyed its target completely, but also caused significant damage to the simulated space station. By the time she finished, several corridors had been sealed due to hull breaches caused by her weapon's power. "Excellent marksmanship," Commander Zalneth said, checking his tablet, "though there will be penalty points for excessive collateral damage." Vexthara looked surprised. "Collateral damage?" "The targets were eliminated efficiently. In real combat, destroying the thing you're trying to protect is not considered efficient," the commander explained. Theklan went next. His gravity hammer could fire gravitational pulses at long range, and he used this ability to crush several targets at once. The weapon was devastatingly effective, but it also warped the metal structure of the space station and made several sections unsafe. Other alien cadets took their turns. Each weapon was impressive and powerful, but Jake noticed that they all caused significant damage to their surroundings. The energy-based weapons were so powerful that they often destroyed more than just their intended targets. Finally, Commander Zalneth called Jake's name. The alien cadets gathered to watch, many of them grinning as if they expected to see something funny. Jake stepped into the scenario area and raised his rifle. The first target appeared in the same location where Vexthara had fired. Jake aimed carefully through his iron sights, took a breath and squeezed the trigger. The rifle made a sharp cracking sound that seemed quiet compared to the energy weapons. The bullet traveled down the corridor and hit the target precisely in the center. The target disappeared, but there was no explosion, no melted walls, and no damage to the station. The alien cadets looked confused. They had expected something more dramatic. The second target appeared behind partial cover. Jake adjusted his aim and fired again. Another direct hit. Another clean elimination with no collateral damage. He moved through the scenario methodically, taking careful aim for each shot. What impressed Jake was how reliable his rifle felt. While the alien weapons needed time to charge between shots or had complex targeting systems that sometimes glitched, his rifle fired every time he pulled the trigger. No delays, no computer errors, no power fluctuations. As the scenario continued, more targets appeared at different ranges and angles. Some were moving, others were partially hidden. Jake dealt with each one calmly, using the skills he had learned during years of military service. The alien cadets stopped grinning and started paying attention. Jake's simple rifle was hitting every target with perfect accuracy, but it was also doing something their weapons couldn't do. It was leaving the space station intact. When Jake finished the scenario, the training room returned to its normal appearance. Commander Zalneth looked at his tablet with a confused expression, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. "Cadet Morrison," he said slowly, "you achieved 100% accuracy with 0 collateral damage. The computer shows that you used exactly 1 round per target, with no wasted ammunition." The alien cadets whispered among themselves. This was not what they had expected to see from the human with the primitive weapon. Dr. Kilnseth, a Helix scientist who had been watching from the observation area, came down to the training floor. Her large compound eyes focused on Jake's rifle with obvious interest. "May I ask a question, Cadet Morrison?" she said in accented English. "Your weapon produces no energy signature that our sensors can detect. How do you achieve such accuracy without computer assistance?" Jake showed her the simple iron sights on his rifle. "Practice," he said, "and these sights have been working for hundreds of years. They don't need power, they don't break down, and they work in any environment." Dr. Kilnseth examined the sights carefully. "Fascinating. No electronics, no energy requirements, completely mechanical. But this seems so basic." "Sometimes basic is better," Katie said, joining the conversation. "Basic means reliable. Basic means it works when you need it to work." Vexthara was still staring at the display showing Jake's perfect score. "But how is this possible? Your weapon has no targeting computer, no rangefinder, no automatic adjustment for wind or gravity." "I learned to do those calculations myself," Jake replied. "Every Marine learns basic ballistics. When you understand how your weapon works, you don't need a computer to tell you where to aim." Commander Zalneth was studying the data from both tests. "The scenarios will become more difficult," he announced. "We'll see how well this traditional approach performs under greater stress." As they prepared for the next test, Jake noticed that the alien cadets were looking at him differently now. The mocking smiles were gone, replaced by curiosity and maybe a little concern. His simple rifle had done something their advanced weapons couldn't do. It had completed the mission perfectly without causing any unnecessary destruction. Ryan Porter clapped Jake on the shoulder. "Nice shooting," he said quietly. "I think you got their attention." Jake reloaded his rifle with practiced efficiency. "This is just the beginning," he said. "Let's see how their fancy weapons handle some real challenges." The second test was much harder than the first. Commander Zalneth programmed the holographic room to simulate the Battle of Kepler Station, a famous fight where galactic forces had stopped a pirate invasion. The environment kept changing every few minutes, testing how well the cadets could adapt to different conditions. "This scenario will test your ability to fight in multiple environments," Commander Zalneth explained. "You will face zero gravity, electromagnetic interference, dense fog, and extreme temperatures. Your weapons must perform in all conditions." Jake looked around the room as it transformed into the interior of a damaged space station. Broken pipes leaked steam into the air, emergency lights flashed, and the artificial gravity kept turning on and off. It was exactly the kind of chaotic environment that Marines trained for. Bex Thera went first again, eager to redeem herself after Jake's perfect performance in the previous test. She raised her plasma rifle and activated its targeting system, but immediately ran into problems. The electromagnetic interference from the damaged station was disrupting her weapon's computer systems. "Target lock unstable," she muttered, tapping the side of her rifle. The holographic display flickered and showed error messages in Zephyrian text. When she finally managed to fire, the plasma bolt went wide and hit a support beam instead of the enemy target. "Equipment malfunction," she called out to Commander Zalneth. "The interference is affecting my targeting matrix." "In real combat, equipment failures happen," the commander replied coldly. "You must adapt and overcome." Vexithara tried again, but her advanced targeting system kept malfunctioning. She managed to hit some targets by firing multiple shots, but her accuracy was much lower than in the first test. The plasma rifle also began overheating, because it wasn't designed to fire so many shots in quick succession. Declan had different problems. When the scenario switched to zero gravity, his gravity hammer started interfering with the station's artificial gravity generators. Instead of creating controlled gravitational pulses, the weapon caused wild fluctuations that threw everyone around the room. "Weapon malfunction," Teclon roared as he tumbled through the air. His gravity hammer was designed to work in normal gravity fields, not in the complex environment of a space station with multiple gravity generators. Other alien cadets faced similar issues. The Helix bioneural weapon stopped working when the temperature dropped below freezing. The Corvin energy shields drained their power cells too quickly in the high-energy environment. The more advanced the weapon, the more things seemed to go wrong. Jake watched all of this while waiting for his turn. He had seen similar problems during his military service. Advanced technology was impressive when it worked, but it often failed at the worst possible times. Simple, reliable equipment was usually better in real combat situations. When Commander Zalneth called his name, Jake stepped into the scenario area and immediately felt the artificial gravity turn off. He had trained extensively in zero gravity during his Marine service, so floating didn't bother him. He used handholds on the walls to position himself and raised his rifle. The first target appeared behind a piece of debris about 40 meters away. Jake aimed through his iron sights, compensated for the lack of gravity, and fired. The bullet traveled in a straight line and hit the target perfectly. No computer guidance, no targeting system, just basic physics and lots of practice. When electromagnetic interference filled the air, Jake's rifle continued working normally. It had no electronic components to malfunction, no targeting computer to disrupt. The iron sights worked just as well whether there was interference or not. The temperature dropped to -20 degrees Celsius, simulating a hull breach in space. The alien weapons had all sorts of problems in the extreme cold. Power cells drained faster, targeting systems froze, and energy weapons lost efficiency. Jake's rifle kept firing normally. Gunpowder worked the same way regardless of temperature. Dr. Kilnzeth was watching Jake's performance with growing excitement. She made notes on her tablet and occasionally clicked in her native language, which Jake had learned was a sign of scientific interest among the Helix. "Remarkable," she said to Katie, who was standing nearby. "The human weapon shows no performance degradation in any of the test environments." "How is this possible?" Katie smiled proudly. Simple mechanical systems are inherently more reliable than complex electronic ones. Jake's rifle has maybe 30 moving parts total. Those plasma rifles probably have thousands of components that can fail. The scenario changed again, this time to dense fog that blocked all vision beyond 5 meters. The alien weapons, with their sophisticated targeting systems, were almost useless because they couldn't lock onto targets they couldn't see clearly. Jake used his experience and training to work through the fog. He listened for movement, watched for muzzle flashes, and used his knowledge of the station layout to predict where enemies might be hiding. When he did shoot, his bullets found their targets while the aliens fired blindly with their energy weapons. Cithara, the young Zephyrian female who had laughed at Jake's rifle earlier, was having particular trouble. Her plasma rifle's targeting computer kept trying to lock onto false targets created by the fog. "This is impossible," she complained. "How can anyone fight without computer assistance?" "The same way soldiers fought for thousands of years before computers were invented," Jake replied as he reloaded his rifle. "With skill, experience, and reliable equipment." When the fog cleared and the final phase of the test began, Jake had hit every target while using exactly 1 bullet per enemy. The alien cadets had used hundreds of energy shots, most of which missed their targets due to equipment malfunctions or environmental interference. Commander Zalneth stared at his tablet in disbelief. According to the computer, Jake had achieved another perfect score while every alien cadet had failed to reach even the minimum passing grade. "This cannot be correct," Vexithara protested. "His weapon is primitive technology. It should be inferior to our advanced systems." Dr. Kilnseth approached Jake and asked to examine his rifle again. This time she studied it much more carefully, looking at every component and asking detailed questions about how it worked. "Ingenious," she finally announced. "This weapon represents a completely different design philosophy. Instead of adding complexity to solve problems, humans have perfected simplicity. No power source to fail, no computers to malfunction, no sophisticated systems to maintain." Decalon was still trying to get his gravity hammer working properly after the zero-gravity test had confused its internal systems. "But our weapons are more powerful," he argued. "Power should matter more than reliability." "In theory, yes," Dr. Kilnseth replied. "But what good is power if the weapon doesn't function when you need it?" Cadet Morrison's rifle fired perfectly in every environment we tested. "Can you say the same about your gravity hammer?" The alien cadets exchanged worried looks. Their advanced weapons had failed in conditions where the human's simple rifle worked perfectly. This was not what they had expected when they first saw Jake's primitive weapon. Jake finished cleaning his rifle and put it back in its case. He had maintained his equipment properly throughout the test, something that was impossible with the energy weapons that needed specialized tools and computer diagnostics. "The final test will be tomorrow," Commander Zalneth announced. "It will be the most challenging scenario we have. All cadets should prepare their equipment accordingly." As the cadets filed out of the training room, Jake noticed that many of the aliens were looking at his rifle case with very different expressions than before. The mockery was gone, replaced by curiosity and what might have been respect. Katie caught up with him in the hallway. "2 perfect scores," she said with a grin. "I think you're starting to make an impression." "Maybe," Jake replied. "But tomorrow's test will be the real challenge. Let's see how they react when the pressure really gets turned up." Word about Jake's performance had spread throughout the academy overnight. When the cadets gathered for the final test, there were more observers than usual. Senior instructors from different departments had come to see the human with the primitive weapon who was outperforming their best students. General Kextar, the academy's commandant, was among the observers. He was a legendary Corvan warrior who had fought in 17 different campaigns across the galaxy. His personal weapon was a prototype quantum disruptor that cost more than most planets spend on defense in a year. "Today's test will simulate the most difficult combat scenario possible," Commander Zalneth announced. "Multi-environment warfare with hostile conditions, equipment stress, and time pressure. This test has only been passed by 3 cadets in the Academy's 200-year history." Jake felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been confident in the previous tests, but this sounded like something else entirely. Around him, the alien cadets were checking their weapons one final time and making last-minute adjustments to their equipment. The holographic room began to change, becoming a nightmarish combination of different environments. One section was a frozen wasteland with blowing snow and temperatures cold enough to freeze metal. Another area was a steaming jungle with thick vegetation and high humidity. A third zone was underwater, requiring the cadets to hold their breath while fighting. You will have 30 minutes to eliminate 50 targets scattered throughout all environments, Commander Zalneth explained. The targets will be mobile, heavily armored, and programmed to fight back. Environmental hazards will change randomly every 5 minutes. Vexthera looked nervous as she checked her plasma rifle for the third time. The weapon had been repaired overnight, but she was clearly worried about more malfunctions. 30 minutes seems very short for such a complex scenario. Real battles don't wait for you to be ready, General Kekstar said from the observation area. His voice carried the authority of someone who had survived decades of actual combat. If you cannot handle pressure in training, you will not survive in war. The test began immediately. Jake rushed toward the frozen section first, knowing that extreme cold had caused problems for the alien weapons in previous tests. His breath made clouds in the frigid air, and ice began forming on his rifle's metal surfaces. The first target was a heavily armored robot that moved quickly between pieces of cover. Jake tracked its movement and fired when it paused to return fire. His bullet struck the robot's weak point perfectly, shutting it down instantly. The cold hadn't affected his rifle's performance at all. Nearby, Sithara was struggling with her plasma rifle. The extreme cold was affecting its power cells, reducing the weapon's charge time and making it fire weaker bolts. She hit her target several times, but the reduced power meant it took multiple shots to achieve what should have been a single kill. Jake moved to the jungle section, where the high humidity and thick vegetation created new challenges. Visibility was limited, and the air was so thick with moisture that it felt like breathing soup. His rifle continued working normally, but he had to rely on his hearing and movement detection skills to find targets. A target burst from the undergrowth directly in front of him. Jake reacted instantly, firing from the hip without using his sights. The bullet found its mark and the robot collapsed. Years of combat training had made this kind of quick reaction automatic. Theclon was having major problems in the jungle. His gravity hammer was designed for open spaces, not dense vegetation. When he tried to fire gravitational pulses, they were absorbed or deflected by the thick plant life. He had to get much closer to his targets, which made him vulnerable to their return fire. The environment changed suddenly, flooding the jungle section with water. Jake took a deep breath and submerged himself, using underwater combat techniques he had learned during amphibious assault training. His rifle was waterproofed and designed to fire even when completely submerged. Swimming toward a target, Jake aimed carefully through the water and fired. The bullet traveled slower underwater, but his experience let him compensate for this. The target was destroyed with a single shot. Above him, he could see alien cadets struggling with weapons that weren't designed for underwater use. Vexithara's plasma rifle had stopped working entirely when it got wet. The sophisticated electronics couldn't handle the water, even though the weapon was supposedly sealed against environmental hazards. She was trying to restart it, but the targeting computer kept showing error messages. Jake surfaced in an air pocket and quickly moved to the next section, which had become a zero-gravity environment filled with floating debris. This was probably the most challenging environment for accurate shooting. But Jake had trained extensively for combat in space. Using debris for cover and handholds, he maneuvered toward his targets while avoiding their return fire. The lack of gravity actually helped his rifle's ballistics in some ways, since bullets traveled in perfectly straight lines without gravity to pull them down. Dr. Kilnzeth was watching Jake's progress with obvious fascination. "Look at the ammunition counter," she pointed out to General Kekstar. "He's still using exactly 1 round per target, even in these extreme conditions." General Kekstar studied the display showing Jake's performance. As a veteran warrior, he understood what he was seeing. That level of accuracy under stress indicates exceptional training and equipment reliability. Most soldiers would be firing wildly by now. The environment changed again, becoming a toxic wasteland with chemical fog that burned the lungs and corroded exposed metal. This was designed to test how well weapons held up to severe environmental damage. Jake wrapped a cloth around his face and continued fighting. His rifle showed some surface corrosion from the chemicals, but it kept firing normally. The simple mechanical systems weren't affected by the toxic environment. Many of the alien weapons were failing completely now. The corrosive chemicals were destroying delicate electronic components and power systems. Even General Kekstar's prototype quantum disruptor was showing warning lights as its sophisticated systems tried to cope with the hostile environment. With 5 minutes left in the test, Jake had eliminated 47 of the 50 targets. The remaining 3 were in the most dangerous section of the scenario, a collapsing structure filled with fire and debris. Most of the alien cadets had given up by now, their weapons either broken or too unreliable to use effectively. Jake moved carefully through the burning building, using smoke and debris for cover. The heat was intense and sweat poured down his face. His rifle was hot to the touch from the ambient temperature, but it continued working perfectly. The final 3 targets were heavily armored and positioned to cover each other. Jake would have to be extremely careful to eliminate them without being destroyed by their combined firepower. He found a position where he could see all 3 targets and began calculating angles and timing. The first shot took out the target on the left. Jake immediately rolled to new cover as return fire tore through the air where he had been. The second shot eliminated the center target while Jake was moving. The third target was harder to hit because it was partially hidden behind debris. Jake waited patiently for the right moment. When the target moved to get a better shot at him, he was ready. His final bullet found its mark with 3 seconds left on the timer. The holographic environment disappeared, leaving the cadet standing in the plane training room. Jake was exhausted and covered in sweat, but his rifle was still ready to fire if needed. Around him, alien cadets were dealing with broken weapons and failed equipment. Commander Zalnath stared at his tablet in complete disbelief. Cadet Morrison has achieved a perfect score in the most difficult test we have. 50 targets eliminated with 50 rounds fired. 0 equipment failures. 0 environmental performance degradation. General Kekstar approached Jake personally. The massive Corvan warrior studied the human's simple rifle, with the eye of someone who had used weapons in real combat for most of his life. I have seen many weapons in my career, Cadet Morrison, he said slowly. I have used devices that can destroy cities and shields that can stop supernovas, but I have never seen anything as effective as a weapon that simply works when you need it to work. Dr. Kilnseth was almost vibrating with excitement as she examined Jake's rifle. This represents a completely different approach to military technology. Instead of adding features and complexity, humans have optimized for reliability and effectiveness. It's brilliant in its simplicity. Vexathera approached Jake hesitantly. Her plasma rifle was still non-functional, sparking occasionally from water damage. I owe you an apology, Jake Morrison. I thought your weapon was primitive because it looked simple. I was wrong. Other alien cadets gathered around asking questions about human weapons and tactics. They wanted to understand how such basic technology could outperform their advanced systems so completely. Jake cleaned his rifle one more time before putting it away. Sometimes the best solution is the one that's been proven to work, he said. We've been using this basic design for centuries because it's reliable, effective, and easy to maintain. As the cadets filed out of the training room, Jake noticed that news of Jake's perfect performance spread throughout the Galactic Military Academy like wildfire. By the next morning, senior officers from every branch of the Galactic Military had requested copies of his test results. The simple human with the primitive weapon had done something that military experts had thought was impossible. Jake was eating breakfast in the Academy cafeteria when Commander Zalnath approached his table. The Corvan officer looked uncomfortable, as if he was about to say something difficult. Cadet Morrison, he began formally, General Kekstar has requested that you demonstrate human weapons technology to the Advanced Tactics class. Would you be willing to instruct other cadets? Jake nearly choked on his food. Yesterday, these same officers had been laughing at his rifle, and now they wanted him to teach classes about it. I'd be honored, sir, he managed to say. Katie grinned at him from across the table. I told you that your rifle would impress them eventually. The Advanced Tactics classroom was packed when Jake arrived. Not only were all the senior cadets present, but instructors from different departments had come to observe. General Kekstar sat in the front row, his damaged quantum disruptor on the desk beside him as a reminder of yesterday's equipment failures. Jake set his rifle on the demonstration table and looked out at the audience. A week ago, he had been nervous about fitting in at the academy. Now he was teaching alien military officers about human technology. Human weapons development follows a different philosophy than most galactic species. he began. "We focus on reliability and effectiveness rather than advanced features or maximum power." Vexthara raised her hand. "But how can simple technology compete with advanced systems? Our weapons have targeting computers, automatic range finding, and energy output far beyond chemical propulsion." Jake picked up his rifle and began disassembling it while he talked. "All those advanced features become weaknesses when they fail. My rifle has 37 moving parts total. How many components does your plasma rifle have?" Vexthara consulted her technical manual. "The Mark 7 plasma rifle contains 2,847 individual components, not counting the ammunition cartridges. Every one of those components can fail," Jake explained. "The more complex a system is, the more ways it can break down. We learned this lesson during our early space wars." Dr. Kilnseth was taking detailed notes. "Can you explain the maintenance requirements for human weapons?" Jake showed them his cleaning kit, which fit in a small pouch. "Basic maintenance takes about 10 minutes. Complete disassembly and cleaning takes 30 minutes. I can do field repairs with simple tools, and replacement parts are interchangeable across thousands of different rifle models." A Helix instructor clicked in amazement. "Our bioneural weapons require specialized technicians and laboratory conditions for any maintenance beyond basic calibration." General Kextar leaned forward. "What about ammunition? Surely chemical propellants have limitations compared to energy systems." Jake pulled out a box of bullets and showed them to the class. "These cartridges will function reliably for decades if stored properly. They work in any environment where the rifle itself functions. No power cells to drain, no energy matrices to align, no quantum states to maintain." Theclon studied the simple ammunition with his compound eyes. "But the power output must be inferior to energy weapons." "Power isn't everything," Jake replied. He projected a holographic display showing ballistics data. "A single bullet from my rifle carries enough kinetic energy to penetrate most personal armor. The key is putting that energy exactly where you need it." Sithara looked confused. "How do you achieve such accuracy without computer assistance? The targeting calculations must be incredibly complex." Jake smiled. "We learn to do the calculations ourselves. Every human soldier studies ballistics, wind compensation, range estimation, and target tracking. When you understand your weapon completely, you don't need a computer to tell you how to use it." He demonstrated by estimating the range to various objects in the classroom, then confirming his estimates with a manual rangefinder. His calculations were accurate within a few centimeters every time. "This is why human weapons work in any environment," Dr. Kilnseth said suddenly. "The soldier becomes the targeting computer, the maintenance system, and the tactical processor. The weapon is just a tool that the human operates." General Kextar nodded slowly. "In my experience, the most dangerous enemies are those who can function when their equipment fails. Humans have built this capability into their entire military system." A senior instructor from the engineering department raised her hand. "Are there any disadvantages to this approach? Surely there are situations where advanced technology provides benefits." Jake considered the question carefully. "Human weapons are less powerful than energy systems in terms of raw output. We can't melt through starship armor or create gravitational fields, but in infantry combat, reliability matters more than maximum power." He pulled up combat statistics from recent galactic conflicts. Energy weapons achieve higher peak performance, but human kinetic weapons have better sustained performance over long engagements. When advanced systems fail, simple systems keep working. Vexthara was studying her plasma rifle with new understanding. "Our weapons are designed to be superior in ideal conditions. Your weapons are designed to function in any conditions." "Exactly," Jake agreed. "We assume that combat will never happen in ideal conditions. Equipment will break, communications will fail, and soldiers will have to make decisions without computer assistance." Commander Zalnith asked the question that everyone was thinking. Would it be possible to adapt human reliability principles to our existing weapon systems? Jake and Katie exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been hoping for. The aliens were finally ready to learn from human technology instead of dismissing it. "It would require a completely different design philosophy," Katie said. Joining the discussion, "You'd have to prioritize simplicity over complexity, proven technology over cutting-edge innovation." Dr. Kilnseth was already sketching ideas on her tablet. "A hybrid approach might be possible. Energy weapons with mechanical backup systems, simplified targeting computers that can be overridden manually. The discussion continued for hours as alien engineers and tacticians explored how human reliability principles could improve their own military systems. Jake found himself at the center of conversations about weapon design, soldier training, and tactical doctrine. When the class finally ended, General Kextar approached Jake personally. "Cadet Morrison, I would like to make you an offer. The Academy has never had a human instructor before, but your performance suggests we need to reconsider our approach to weapons training." Jake felt honored, but also homesick. "I appreciate the offer, General, but I have obligations to Earth's military." "Of course," the General replied. "But perhaps we could arrange an exchange program. Human instructors could teach reliability principles here, while our experts share advanced technology with Earth." As Jake packed up his rifle, he reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. He had come to the Academy expecting to learn from advanced alien technology. Instead, he had taught them that sometimes the best technology was the kind that had been working reliably for centuries. Bexathara waited for him outside the classroom. "Jake, I wanted to thank you for showing me something important. I've been so focused on having the most advanced weapon that I forgot the purpose of weapons is to complete the mission." "Your plasma rifle is impressive," Jake replied. "But maybe you could learn some backup skills for when the electronics fail." She laughed. "I've already requested permission to train with kinetic weapons. If a human can achieve perfect accuracy with iron sights, perhaps a Zephyrian can learn to do the same." As Jake walked back to his dormitory, he passed groups of alien cadets discussing human weapons and tactics. The primitive technology that they had mocked was now the subject of serious military study throughout the Academy. Katie caught up with him in the hallway. "So how does it feel to be the Academy's first human weapons instructor?" Jake slung his rifle case over his shoulder. "Strange," he admitted. "A week ago they thought we were primitive. Now they want to learn from us." "Maybe that's the most important lesson of all," Katie said thoughtfully. "Advanced doesn't always mean better. Sometimes the old ways work because they've been tested by time and proven reliable." That evening, Jake received a message from Earth's military command. They had heard about his performance at the Academy and wanted a full report on alien weapons technology. But they were even more interested in the fact that simple human weapons had outperformed the galaxy's most advanced military systems. As Jake began writing his report, he realized that he had learned something important at the Academy. Humans might not have the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but they had something equally valuable: the wisdom to know that the best solution was often the simplest one that worked reliably when lives were on the line. The alien cadets had learned to respect human weapons not because they were primitive, but because they were perfected. Sometimes the greatest innovation was knowing when to stop innovating and focus on making something work exactly the way it was supposed to, every single time.